Time is done. Time is done. Okay. Of course, this will not go good. Live. Is it on? Okay. Hello everyone. Good afternoon all. And it's Gautam, and we are taking botany today. So, in the last session, we have completed sexual reproduction of flowering plants. In that, the pollination we are seeing pollination got complete. So, pollination we have seen the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of the same flower, of the same plant, or of different plant, of the same species. These are the conditions you need to remember. You may get confused there, but once you see the diagrams and all, it is easier to understand. So this is about the pollination, the process of pollination, the process of transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of the same flower, of the same plant, or of different plant, of the same species. It is, we call it as pollination. So pollination is based on the source of pollen grains. There are of three types what we are seeing, that is autogamy, geitonogamy, and xenogamy. So autogamy is nothing but self-pollination. Geitonogamy is nothing but a neighbor flower pollination. So think that, see, this is a flower. So the transfer of anther to the stigma of the same flower, within the same flower it is taking place, then we call this as autogamy. So if the transfer of flower of one flower, this is I am a plant here. So this is one flower and this is another flower. So the transfer of anther to the stigma from this flower to this flower, then we call this as geitonogamy. So the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of the neighbor flower of the same plant, we call this as geitonogamy. So in geitonogamy case, it is functionally cross pollination, where there is a requirement of pollinator there, because this is flower 1 and this is flower 2. There is a requirement of transfer of pollen grains from here to here. A pollinator is required, functionally cross pollination, but genetically it is a self pollination, because it is taking place in the same plant, no. So it is genetically self pollination. So there is no much variations are seen here. That is in case of geitonogamy. So that is the point you need to remember. In case of self-pollination or autogamy, so there are conditions, two conditions are required. The release of pollen grains and the stigma receptivity should occur at the same time, that we call it as synchrony of stigma receptivity and the release of pollen grains. It should both of them, it should get mature at the same time, then only self pollination will be taking place. That is the one condition. And the another condition is both stigma and the pollen grains, that's this anther, should be close together. Then if the flower follows two conditions, then we can say that the self pollination is possible in that cases. So autogamy required two conditions to get happen the self pollination there. That is, one is synchrony of the both stigma and the pollen grains, and the another one is they should present close together. So that is self pollination. In case of cross pollination or xenogamy, so there is a requirement of pollinators there also, but it is properly, it is one plant, it is another plant, two plants are there, one flower is this and the another flower is this. So this flower has to, so this is of same species. If it is hibiscus plant, this is also hibiscus plant. So the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of two different plants of the same species, so that we call it as cross pollination. And there are two types of flowers we have seen, and that is okay, let us see here. So these are the diagrams which are given in your book. So this is self pollinated flower. So you need to remember this diagrams also, because in the last 20 21 or 2020. They gave one diagram there and they asked a question. So let us check that what it is. In that regarding that content we have discussed in the last session, but see this one is that in 2024 I think, yes. So they asked identify the correct description about the given figure. This is a given figure. We don't know that what it is. This is a given figure and the feature they have given. See here, it is inflorescence and these are feathery and which can trap the pollen grains. So they are talking about a wind pollinated plant, inflorescence is showing. So all the flowers are present, showing flowers with the well exposed stamens there. So it is about the wind pollinated. So like that they may question, they may ask in the exam. So you need to remember the diagrams and images of NCERT also. So this is self-pollinated flower and this is cross-pollinated flower. This is cross-pollination, it takes place in this flower. And we have discussed in the last session that is two types of flowers are seen in case of viola, oxalis and pomelina. So these in three plants, two types of flowers are seen: chasmogamous flower and clistogamous flower. Chasmo means open; it is open flower, and clisto here clisto means closed. That is closed flower. So open flower and closed flower it will be seen in case of this tree plant. And here you can see chasmogamous open flower and this is clistogamous. And the special thing about this clistogamous flower here is they are present below this ground level, but they can so closed flower means always remain closed. So if it is remain closed, the transfer of pollen grain takes place within the same flower. So complete autogamy is possible here. So complete self-pollination is seen in case of clistogamous flowers and azure seed sets. Azure seed sets in the sense, so there is if the flower is there, definitely there will be a formation of seed within that, because so sometimes what happens is flowers may not get pollinated and the flower will wither, they will drop off. But in this case of clistogamous flowers, the flowers remain closed and definitely there is a possibility of pollination and the fertilization will take place and the seed formation will take place. And in case of clistogamous flowers, they are invariably autogamous and azure seed set is possible in case of clistogamous flower there. So it is about the diagrams. So we have discussed in the last class about this autogamy and that. Coming to this agents of pollination, yesterday we are discussing about the agents of pollination. So there is a requirement of pollinator to transfer the pollen grain from anther to the stigma. So there are two types we have discussed yesterday mainly, that is abiotic pollinators or abiotic agents and biotic agents. So when we are discussing about the abiotic agents, and another one is biotic agents. So comparative to this abiotic and biotic agents, most of the angiosperms they will pollinate with the help of biotic agents like honeybee, animals are there, no, like that, insects and all. So these abiotic factors are comparatively less that compared to the biotic agents. So in abiotic agents, so in that two are there, that is wind pollinated plants and the another one is water pollination. So yesterday we have completed this wind pollinated plants and what are the features of wind pollinated plants we have completed in the last session. So compared to this, here wind pollination maximum is there, means compared abiotic factors or abiotic agents is less compared to the biotic. And within the abiotic there are two, wind and water, where wind pollinated plants are high, so the water pollinated plants are even that, in that it is reduced, means less number of plants undergo water pollination there with the help of water. And the plants which are undergoing wind pollination, we call them as anemophily. We call them as anemophily. And the plants which are undergoing with the help of the pollination with the help of water, we call them as hydrophily. And here in the wind, so when it comes to the wind pollinated plant, how the flowers will be? The flowers will be having produced in the on the inflorescence. So I am just writing it rough. So yesterday we have discussed, no, that's it. Inflorescence they will form all the flowers, small flowers, it will be present on the floral axis. The arrangement of flowers on the axis, we call this as inflorescence. And in most of the cases they are monocots, and especially like take example of grasses also. And how the pollen grains are? Pollen grains are lightweight, and they are lightweight and non-sticky. They are not sticky nature they are having. That is non-sticky pollen grains are. And if you see the stigma, that female reproductive structure, stigma is feathery and well exposed. It is exposed to the air so that it can trap the pollen grains. It can trap the pollen grains. If it is waving like this, feathery, it will trap the pollen grains easily. The stigma is feathery and exposed here. Pollen grain is light and non-sticky. And here, especially monocots are there. So these are the features of wind pollinated plants. And the wind, and it produces, the pollen grains are produced high in number because the chance factor of combining with the female reproductive structure is less. That's why the pollen grains are produced in a high number. And coming to this water pollinated plants. So water pollinated plants are also called as hydrophily. And in that there are, we will be seeing, see, in case of algae, bryophytes, pteridophytes, in the earlier plants. So in plant kingdom you have studied, no, algae, bryophytes, pteridophytes, and gymnosperms and angiosperms. The first three are, they will be using the water as a medium to transfer the gametes. So water as a medium to transfer the gametes from male to female there. So there, in the earlier cases we have seen. And in case of water pollinated plants, they are limited to the 30 genera. 30 genera, and they are mainly monocots. And in case of water pollinated plants, we have discussed yesterday. So in case of freshwater plants, so freshwater plant, you can take example of Vallisneria. And in case of marine water plant, you can take example of Zostera. So that is Zostera. And there are two types in the hydrophily. So in the hydrophily, there are of two types you will be seeing: epihydrophily and this hypohydrophily. Two types of pollination we will be seeing here. Epihydrophily in the sense what? Epi means upper surface. So if it is a water layer is there here, so there is think that there is a water here. So this much of water there, this much of water. So the pollination will be taking place with the help of releasing the pollen female flowers here like this on the surface, and the pollen grains will be released here like this. So the pollen grains are released here. So on the surface, it is on the surface of the water. So it is on the surface, that is epihydrophily. Whereas hypohydrophily in the sense the plant will be present within this, and it will be, the flower will be within the under this surface. So this hypohydrophily means pollen grain has to reach here, that is hypohydrophily. So example for this hypohydrophily is, example you can take of Vallisneria here. So that is where the water surface pollination will be taking place. Whereas hypohydrophily is there, no? That example you can take of Zostera, which is marine water plant, that is where the transfer of pollen grains will be taking place. It has to reach the down there, hypohydrophily. And they are limited to 30 genera, and it is freshwater and marine water. Even yesterday I said there are two cases, that is water lily and water hyacinth. They are, even though they are present in water, but they don't use water as a medium for pollinating agent there. So they require insect or wind to get pollinated. So that is the case in case of water pollinated plants. So fresh water and marine water, it is the, and coming to this feature, how the water pollinated plants are. Biotics I will write in the next slide. So how the water pollinated plants will be. So the water pollinated flower features are, so the water pollinated flower features are, here the pollen grain, it will be covered with a mucilaginous layer. So it is a pollen grain. If it is a pollen grain is there, it will be covered with a mucilaginous layer upon this, so that it should not get wet here. See, we know that for the pollen germination, so pollen grain has to get moisture, humidity should be there, temperature, that moisture should be there, so that the pollen grain has to germinate means. So if we are providing moisture to that, it will germinate, no? So because of this, since it is presenting here, since they are present in water, the pollen grain will be covered with a mucilaginous layer there. So they are covered with a mucilaginous layer. So they are covered with a mucilaginous layer in case of pollen grains which are present in the water pollinated plants. And in some case the pollen grains are ribbon like structure like this. These are ribbon shaped pollen grains are there. So ribbon shaped in the sense, see, in case of hypohydrophily, the pollen grains has to reach there from here to here in case of, especially in marine water. So the pollen grain here is a ribbon shape. In case of Zostera, it is the pollen grain will be ribbon shaped. If it is a ribbon shaped, it will be flowing in this water, no, like this. So you just take example of chunni or that sari or the cloth. The cloth, it will be floating it will be moving in the water, no? So that here it will be you can take the pollen grains which is having ribbon shape, so that it can reach the flower which is present in the lower surface of the water. Hypohydrophilic case, the pollen grain will be like this. So the next is, so that is water pollinated plants, and they are not colorful also. And since there is no requirement of insect, bird or anything, so since that the water pollinated plants are not so much attractive, here in case of they don't require any fragrance, they don't require any colorful petals and all in case of water pollinated plants. And one more thing you need to remember, yesterday I said that is water hyacinth, and water lily. So here most of the students, they will get confused. Water hyacinth and water lily, even though they are present in water, but they require pollinators. So these are not water pollinated here. So these are not water pollinated. So it is very important to note that, don't forget that. So these are some examples where you can see abiotic agents like wind and water. So this is water plants, and this is two wind. There is another diagram. So, see. So abiotic agents like wind. So example like take grass or monocot plants, where wind pollination will be taking place. You see, this is inflorescence, where it will be having the stigma or the stamens will be there. And here you can see corn cob and tassels. So tassels now they replaced with the word that ear there. So ear of corn you can see. So it is ear of corn, and these are pollens. So these pollens, these are feathery. You can see here. These are feathery hair-like structures are there. No, like it can hold the pollens, airborne pollen grains easily. So due to that, it is modification of this. It will be like this. See, you can see this hair-like structures. No, so it is due to this, to catch or to trap the pollen grains. That is wind pollinator. And coming to this water pollinated plants. See the water pollinated plants, how these are. This is flower. So you can see this. Flower is coming on the surface. So on the surface of water. And this stamens are releasing the pollen grains, and they will be carried through the water passive agent. The water it will be moving, and it will be reaching this here. So when this pollination is taking place on the surface, we call this as what? We call them as epihydrophily. So the pollen grains are released here, and they are carried in the passively through this, and it will be reaching there. And these are like this. The female flower, it is connected with the stalk like structure. This is female flower here, and the male flower, it will release the pollen grains on the surface, and it will come, it will carry it to that. And these are Vallisneria, how it looks, and Hydrilla is also example for that. And Zostera is the marine grass where the pollen grains will be ribbon shaped there. And next, water hyacinth and water lily. See, you just think water lily is there. So now it is on water surface. So the flower which is present, they are on the surface if it is like this. So the water cannot reach there, no, to make pollination. So it require what? So it require insect. Some insect should come and sit on this, and it will take from here to here. So insects are through with the wind. Wind is required to get pollinated in case of water lily and water hyacinth. So there is no requirement of water there. Wind is required, either the insect is required. So in case of water hyacinth and water lily, the pollination will be taking place with the help of insects. Or okay, next coming to this biotic agent. Okay, coming to this biotic agents here. So biotic agents are nothing but animals here. Animals majorly they are insect pollinated. Insect, especially within that bees. Bees are the pollinators, and birds. Some are, so there are different terminologies are used here. The plants which are getting pollinated with the help of insects, we call this as entomophily. If they are getting pollinated with the birds, we call it as ornithophily. So the bird is making the pollination here, and if it is getting pollinated with the bat, this is bat here. So if the plants are getting pollinated with the bats, we call this as chiropterophily. And if there are some cases like lemur, here lemur is sitting here, like primates, which are arboreal in the sense tree dwelling, which are present in upon the trees. Some rodents, arboreal rodents, tree upon this like squirrels and all. Reptiles is there. So reptiles is also responsible sometimes. Some are like, you can see the reptile lizard which is making the pollination there. So these are biotic agents, and abiotic agents we have discussed there. So how the biotic agent pollinated flowers will be? So how the biotic agents pollinated flowers will be in the sense? So these flowers are attractive here. Flowers are attractive because it has to impress the insect, or if it has to impress the birds, it has to impress the bats. So it has to give some rewards to that. If so, there is mutual relationship is there. Like if I am coming and doing favor of pollination, so you should give me a reward to that. That reward will be like giving something, like feeding them, giving pollen grains to eat, or to make them to drink the nectar. So that is the reward, floral reward. So the flowers are attractive here, and They will be having some floral rewards like the pollen grains or the nectar. So the nectar will be there here, and the petals are attractive. So the colorful petals are there, and fragrance. Sometimes the flower should release some very good fragrance so that it can attract the insects to the fragrance. And sometimes the colorful petals is one, and the fragrance is the another one, and the nectar and the pollen grains also, it should be like nutritive so that it can give the floral rewards. Here floral rewards are two, not the colorful petals and fragrance there. Floral rewards are of two types. Two will be there, that is, one is pollen grain, which is a nutritive content which will be giving them the reward. So if you are doing me a pollination, then I will give pollen grain to eat. You just eat the pollen grain. Or here they will give the nectar also, which is juice there, nectar juice, which is giving as a floral reward to the pollinators there. So these are the floral rewards. And there are some organisms, there are some animals which will eat and drink the pollen grain and nectar here, but they don't do pollination. So that we call them as pollen robbers. There are some pollen robbers are there. So there are some pollen robbers are there. So those pollen robbers are nothing but they drink nectar, they eat pollen grain, but not help in pollination. So pollination will not take place here. That we call this as pollen robbers. So that usually, like, there is no specific group of insects are there. Pollen robbers are randomly. If it is not making the pollination to happen in between that plant, then we call them as pollen robbers. And that is of biotic agents where which are involved in it. That these are, and the uh, biotic agent pollinated flower will be having this kind of features. Okay, so everything it will be there like this. So it has to attract these animals so that it should get pollinated there. And there are some group of plants which give, not only give the floral reward of in case of just as pollen grain or nectar, they also give the place to the lay eggs. So biotic agents, animals, insect pollinated flowers, feature of insect. Okay, so you can take example of Amorphophallus. So Amorphophallus is one such example where you can see the insect will be laying the eggs within this. So which is of tallest flower, it is tallest flower which is of 6 feet, which gives place to lay the eggs here. So which gives place to the lay eggs, to lay eggs. So the animals, they can take rest also, they can lay the eggs in case of this, in case of Amorphophallus. So there is another one example of yucca plant here, the yucca plant, and this is Pronoba insect. Pronoba insect, there is a relationship between yucca plant and Pronoba insect here. So this relationship is, it is mandatory to get complete the life cycle. This Pronoba insect is, it will be laying the eggs there, and that yucca plant will get pollinated only with this insect. So this is why we call this as, to complete the life cycle, they are interdependent. So to complete the life cycle, they require both the yucca plant and Pronoba insect, which should be taking place. To complete the life cycle, both of them, they are interdependent there. And there is one more example is there, like beetles. So they require not only good fragrance here, but in case of beetles, very awful smell which is not good. So the bad smell is also used as bad smell of flower is also used for attracting of these beetles here. So they will release some bad smell, they bad odor which is not good odor there. So they will be releasing that. So in the NCRT you can see where do we see the we'll just I will show the NCRT lines also here so that we get a clarification. See, so far what we have discussed in this, in agents of pollination A, so here you can see there are two types are there, used two abiotic. Two abiotic means one wind and water and one biotic that is animal. So agents to achieve the pollination, majority of the plant use, so majority of the plant use, you can see that majority of the plant use biotic agents for pollination. Only a small proportion of plant use abiotic agents. Pollen grains coming in contact with sigma is a chance factor, means it is very less, both wind and water. That's why to compensate that, so to compensate for this uncertainties, so they will release enormous amount of pollen grains. So associated with this, we can get a question. Even they asked once also that in PYQ regarding this to compensate the uncertainty of associated with the loss of pollen grains. The flower produces enormous amount of pollen when compared to the number of ovules there. So regarding this diagram, they asked in the last NCRT, last PYQ, they asked on wind pollinated plants. No? There is a network picture. See, regarding this diagram only, they asked in the last exam. So that is 2024. What we have seen just now. So what are the wind pollinated features of plants are? This see pollen grains are lightweight and non-sticky, and well exposed stamens are given. Well exposed stamens are given there, and large, often feathery stigma, and easily drop the airborne pollen grains. Wind pollinated flowers often a single ovule and single ovary. Okay, this point I know. So they will be having a single ovary and the single ovule will be there, and the numerous flowers packed in the inflorescence. There will be only one ovule will be there within the ovary. And cob, see, a familiar example is corn cob, and the ears you see is nothing but the stigma and style. So the corn cobs, which I showed in the maize plant, it is of ears are nothing but where it is gathered, it is making a ear there. So, but in the last old NCERT, they have given as a tassel. You need to change that tassel into ear here. So that ear of this one, see nothing but the stigma and style, which wave in the wind to trap the pollen grains. And pollination by water is quite rare compared to the wind pollinated, and they are limited to 30 genera, and most of them are monocots. And next, so in the earlier cases like bryophytes, pteridophytes and all, we have seen the pollination, not pollination. The transfer of gametes is done with the help of water there. The basic need for water was transport of male gametes and fertilization there. In case of Valisneria and Hydrilla, the pollination will be taking place. These are fresh water, and marine grass example is Zostera. And not this statement is there, no, not all the aquatic plants are use water for pollination, because majority of the aquatic plants, see, you need to remember this statement. In a majority of the aquatic plants such as water hyacinth and water lily, the flower Majority of the aquatic plants is, you need to remember, majority of the water plants are not pollinated by the water there. They are, instead of that, they are pollinated by the insect or wind, but most of the land plants. And in case of Vallisneria, the female flower reaches the surface, that we call it as surface pollinated flower, and the pollen grains are carried passively by the water currents. And another one is, in case of sea grasses, they are submerged, they remain submerged in the water. So the pollen grains has to move and they are released. So they are having ribbon-like structures and they are carried passively inside the water. Passively inside the water in the sense, so remember this one, passively inside the water. They are not carrying by anything. Passively means it is working towards the gravity there. If the pollen grains are released, they are going down, no? So the passively, it is with the help of gravity, it will be moving. So some of them reach stigma and achieve pollination. Some of them, even it is also a chance factor here. Some of them reach stigma and achieve pollination, and some of them may not. And in most of the water pollinated species, pollen grains are protected by a mucilaginous covering. So to avoid wetting there, because if it is getting wet, it will be undergoing moisturization and it will be showing pollen germination. No? So that's why it is protected by that. And in case of both wind and water pollinated plants, they should not be worry about that one. So not very colorful, and they no need of producing any nectar to attract anyone, because it is a non-living thing, so they don't require anything. So in case of biotic, majority of the flowering plants use a range of animals as a pollinating agent, that is bees, butterflies, flies, beetles, wasps, ants, moths, birds, sunbirds, and hummingbird is the example for that. And bats are common pollinating agents. So these are common pollinating agents. So among the animals, insects, particularly bees are the dominated. Oh, that is very true. So initially I said no, bees are the dominating one. Even larger animals such as primates, example lemur is given. Just now I showed the image. Arboreal rodent, tree dwelling, which are like squirrels and all, and reptiles like gecko lizard and garden lizards are used there. So pollinators in some species. And often flower of animal pollinated. Okay. So coming to this, they are large, colorful, fragrant, and rich in nectar. So these are the feature of water biotic or insect pollinator plants. So they are, when the flowers are small, number of flowers are clustered in the form of inflorescence. When they are small, so it makes inflorescence. Make them conspicuous. Conspicuous means which are visible. So conspicuous. The animals are attracted to the flower which are color and fragrant. So due to that, it will be attracted. In case of flies and beetles, it will produce some foul odors to attract them. And to sustain animal visits, they provide rewards. So once the bee has visited the plant, so it will give some reward to that, so that it should come for the next time. That is, floral reward is given. The nectar and the pollen grains usually have floral reward. So remember these things. There are many features are there of the insect pollinated plants, but nectar and pollen are the main usual floral rewards. These two are the floral rewards here. So for the this harvesting of this reward, the animal visitors come in contact with the anthers, and the stigma body of the animal gets coated with the pollen grains, which are sticky, and that is also required. Sticky it will be in case of this one. It brings about the pollination. So it there is Amorphophallus, I said no. The flower itself is of 6.6 feet height. So tallest flower, where the laying of it will be producing safe places to lay the eggs. And in similar relationship is seen in case of yucca plant and the pronuba moth there, where the pollination will be taking place, and even it will be providing a space to lay the eggs, so that it will not Here in case of this, the larva of the moth come out of the eggs, the seed started developing there. So when it is getting fertilized there, so the larva will come out. So in case of that, that is of this. And some examples are given, and some activity is given to you in this para. You need to observe that how the pollination will be taking place. You need to observe a tree, and what are the pollen visitors, pollination, and what are the pollen robbers. You need to collect some information regarding that. So next we will be seeing about inbreeding depression or outbreeding devices. Some questions are there. We'll solve that and we'll go for it. So autogamy can occur. So autogamy can occur in chasmogamous flower. So autogamy is nothing but what? Self-pollination can occur in a chasmogamous. Chasmogamous flower is nothing but it is a open flower. So when it is possible, they are asking that when self-pollination is possible in case of chasmogamous flower, and how it is should be, how it should, this flower should be. Pollen matures before maturing the ovule, no, because they should mature at the same time, no. Ovule mature before maturity of pollen, no. Both the pollen and ovule mature simultaneously, this is correct. Both anther and sigma are equal length, no, it is also correct, because if they are present, not equal length, so it is not, but they should present closely. So if female reproductive structure, it will be present, it should present closely to that, so that transfer should take place easily. The option C will be the answer. Choose the correct statement from the following. So you just read the question. Choose the correct statement from the following. Okay, coming to here, first statement only we get the answer. Clistogamous means closed flowers. These are closed flowers. Where always exhibit autogamy, that is the correct statement. Chasmogamous flowers always exhibit geitonogamy. It is not always, there is no statement that which shows that not always. Clistogamous flowers exhibit both autogamy and geitonogamy. No, geitonogamy is not possible, only autogamy. Chasmogamous flowers never exhibit autogamy. No, the option A will be answered. A particular species of plant produces light, non-sticky pollen and a large number, and stigmas are long, feathery. These modifications facilitate pollination by which are lightweight, non-sticky, means what? If it is sticky, it is insect pollinated. Here what they are saying, lightweight, non-sticky means it has to carry easily in the wind. So here the wind pollinated plant it is. So from among the situation given below, choose the one that prevents both autogamy and geitonogamy. It should prevent both autogamy and geitonogamy means it should follow cross pollination, that is xenogamy should follow. So monoecious plant bearing unisexual flower. Monoecious plant bearing unisexual flower in the sense. So here monoecious means where the sexes are present in the same plant. If it is male plant, this should be a female plant, like that. If this is male flower, this is female flower. Unisexual flower is nothing but male flower is there, female flower is there within the same plant. Within the same plant means geitonogamy will take place, but there is no chance of cross pollination. Geitonogamy takes place, that's why it is not possible. Dioecious plant bearing only one male female flower. Dioecious are nothing but it is male plant which is having this flower, and which is having this flower, it is female plant. This is dioecious. So there is a possibility of cross pollination, not autogamy and geitonogamy. This will be the answer. Next, see, monoecious plant with bisexual flower. Within the same flower, it will be, no, it is not. Autogamy is possible in this. Dioecious plant with bisexual flower. Dioecious plant with bisexual flower is saying. Dioecious is not possible when both male and female reproductive structure are there. So option B will be the answer. So what is the characteristic feature of inflorescence in a wind pollinated flower? So how the inflorescence will be? Single and isolated flower? No. Numerous flowers packed into an inflorescence? This is correct. Large and colorful petals? That is not required for wind pollinated. Scented flowers? It is also not required. So option B will be the answer. So why do tassels, that is replaced now, ear of corn wave in wind? That is to trap the pollen grain. So what part of the corn cob functions as a stigma, a style in the wind pollination? So that they have removed tassel words, but the option A will be the answer. So that in flowering plants, which type of plants commonly undergo pollination by water? Conifers, Venus, dicot, mono. So the option A will be answer. The monocot will be undergoing water. So what is the primary mode of pollination in lower plant groups such as algae, bryophytes? It is not a primary mode of pollination because there is no pollen grains in it. So it's just a transfer of gamete, then it is water will be the correct answer. Which of the following plants examples of water pollinated plants? Water hyacinth and water lily are not. Vallisneria and hydrilla, fresh water. Zostera and water lily not. Water hyacinth not zoster. So the option B will be the answer. So outbreeding devices, that we will continue in the next session. So if you have any doubts, you just go through that DPP, solve the question. So this is enough for today's class. We just revise the pollen, how the flower is featured. So there are some questions are there even in the NEET they asked. For example, like this one, pollination in water hyacinth and water lily is brought. NEET 2016 question. It is insect or wind, not by water. And there is in bryophytes and pteridophytes, NEET 16 transport of male gametes require water. That is also the last previous year question. These are. Okay, this one is also NEET 2015 question, that is, which of the following are important for floral rewards to the animal pollinators? Floral reward, not a floral fragrance, that is not a reward. Protein pellicle and stigmatic exudates, not. Color and large size of flower, not. Pollen grain and nectar is the correct answer. Option B will be the answer. Attractants and rewards are required for anemophily, not. Anemophily means air pollinated, wind pollinated, these are. Entomophily means insects. So this one will be the answer here. Hydrophily, no. Water pollinated, Cleistogamy, not. So flowers which have single ovule and single ovary in 2017, they asked packed inflorescence usually pollinated by wind pollination. Which of the following is incorrect wind pollinated plants here? NEET 2021. Wind pollinated. Many ovules in each ovary? No. Only one ovule will be there. Flower, that is the incorrect we got in the first one only. Flowers are small, not brightly colored, that is also correct. Pollen grains are light and non-sticky, correct. Well exposed semen, that is also correct. The option 1 will be the answer here. Water hyacinth, again, see, you can see in the 2020 NEET again. Water hyacinth and water lily are pollination takes place by water currents only, wind and water, insect and water, insect and wind, so option D. The term used to transfer the pollen grains from anther to the one plant of stigma to the different plants, which during the pollination bring genetically different type of pollen grains to the stigma, then it is xenogamy, cross pollination. Different plant of the same species. No? Okay, this is what 2022 statement based question they asked, statement 1 and statement. Clistogamous flowers are invariably autogamous, that is correct. Clistogamy is a disadvantage as there is no chance of cross pollination. This is also correct. There is an advantage also, but both the statements are correct in case of this. So remaining we will discuss in the next section. So till that, take it. Thank you.